Hey, this is going to be a different kind of video, perhaps a little long and a little wordy. Feel free to get yourself a snack or drink and strap right in. We're going to do some learning. What are TTRPGs? You've probably already played several RPGs if you enjoy video or computer games. TTRPGs, or tabletop role-playing games, are role-playing games played at a table or online table with friends. The very basics of TTRPGs are what many players would call collaborative storytelling. It's about friends gathering around a table and playing pretend with each other, acting out climactic battles, hilarious hijinks, sad moments, and whatever else the players may want to experience. Modern day, futuristic, medieval fantasy, comedic, dark, noir, long-term or short-term, the only limit is the rules of the game and the creativity of the players. This video is going to be chock full of concepts that I'm going to need other videos to get in depth with, but let's get started. So, how do we play this game? There are a few important things you need so that you and your players may be able to embark on an epic adventure. First, a game and/or rule set. This might include acquiring a rulebook, various kinds of multi-sided die, a pen and paper, and of course, your very own creativity. Some games may include or require extra things like maps, boards, and miniatures. What are the roles? Most tabletop games will have a minimum of 2 roles that could be expanded upon by the rules of that specific game. Game Master and Player Character. The Game Master or GM is usually a very interesting role. They often have power over most to all non-player characters, NPCs, and can cause shifts in the created world that drive story and plot forward. Think of them as referees and narrators. All the other players get to be player characters or PCs. In an average game, they control one character unless the rules state otherwise. Heroes, villains, soldiers in a hopeless war, faithless outlaws in the Wild West, anything is possible in a tabletop game. Finding a game, genre, or system. Part 1. Genre. A good method here is starting with genre. Like with books and movies, there are all kinds of tabletop games. Everyone knows about Dungeons & Dragons, right? Fantasy harking back to movies like Lord of the Rings, but they come in all shapes and sizes, settings, and timelines, such as sci-fi, cyberpunk, horror, urban, fantasy, historical, and even modern. And we can't forget the games based around popular media titles like Star Wars, Call of Cthulhu, The Dresden Files, Firefly, Game of Thrones, Dragon Age, and so many more. And if none of that fits your tastes or interests, there are genre-agnostic systems, that is to say systems where the genre can be whatever you want it to be. Systems like GURPS, Fate, Simple System, and the D6 or D20 systems. You can tinker with these until you have something you can be truly excited about. In reality, the options are basically endless. Part number 2, Games and Rules. So, you've gathered fellow players at the table, pen and paper and some dice, but why do you need to pick a game/rule system? Simply put, there is nothing to stop imaginative and creative players from getting together, nothing in hand, and simply making up a story as they go along, but this can often lead to disagreements or stagnation. Who wins the fight? Did you fall off the wall? Does the guard hear you sneaking up behind him? These questions are made a lot easier to answer when you have a game system or rule set to play within. With rules, dice, and paper to keep track of it all, the story can have both moments of victory and defeat, of tension and of assuredness. Fights can then be more or less difficult, and the players, and sometimes the GM, won't know who's winning. Is there anything more exciting than being unsure if victory is possible? The first question when it comes to choosing a game system is related to the rules. Rules-heavy systems versus rules-light systems. Each have their benefits and detriments that I hope to expand upon in future videos, but the basics boil down to this. Rules-heavy systems are dense or stiff for lack of better words. There is always a way for a GM to handle just about any kind of situation the players may cause, and if there isn't a rule for it, the system may have a contingency plan. These systems are often more reminiscent of video and computer games with things like stats and skills. The games trend towards being complex and can be hard to learn at first, but can be rather rewarding for you to master. Rules-light systems are loose and free-flowing by comparison. They are often built with less game direction, but more player and GM decision-making and the openness to make many different kinds of stories. Some systems are rules-light enough to allow players to choose how they want things to go or where they want the plot to end. Less rules, often less skills, simplified combat, they want the players to have more control and be able to explore story and themes over combat and mechanics. Short versus long campaigns. The second question when it comes to starting games is length. How long do you want your tabletop game to be? When players play a tabletop game, a single story will often be referenced to as a campaign. For example, You could be a part of 3 different Dungeons & Dragons campaigns with 3 different player groups or parties, but you're all still playing the same game. It is possible to play long-term, several-week or month-long campaigns with a huge overarching and complex plot. It can even go on until the players just decide to end it years later. This can at times overwhelm newer players. Some newer players don't even realize that you can have shorter campaigns, with a pre-decided number of sessions or times when the players gather to play the game itself. Campaigns can be as short as a single session, also known as a one-shot, and really, any system can be played in a one-shot style. Reasons to do so are numerous. They allow you to test systems you've never played with before and learn about them without a serious commitment, or as a newer player, they can show you if this is a hobby or game that you could see yourself investing in further. How do you find players? The last question is about finding players. This may be more or less difficult depending on your situation. Maybe you have several friends that already want to play, or perhaps you are all alone. When playing with your friends, be aware of how much experience they all have and make sure they are reliable, consistent, and committed. You want players that will come to each session or clearly let the group know when they can't. Planning and time management can be very important when playing tabletop role-playing games. Perhaps you've got nobody with you. Let me tell you, boy do you have options. You can meet people in real life, like in tabletop-adjacent stores or gathering places. Sometimes even libraries are places of potential tabletop player finding. And if all of these fail or you have crippling anxiety, no judgment, there is always online. Unless you don't have the internet, but you are watching this video, so I'll assume that isn't the case. There are perhaps millions of forums, chat rooms, and websites, all made for finding and talking to other persons interested in tabletop gaming. From Facebook to Reddit to Discord to random online forums that somehow exist, the internet is brimming with those who desire to embark on a grand adventure. You must be wary, however. Not all players and by extension people are built of the same caliber. Basically, you want to be careful who you choose to play with, get to know them a little bit. You want people who are, like I said before, reliable, consistent, and committed. You also want to make sure your desires and goals line up. Do you want to play a fantasy or sci-fi game? Do you want to have heavy or light rules? Do you want to have a focus on story and roleplay? Or are you just one of those weirdos that loves math and number crunching? A malformed player group is sometimes worse than having no players at all. Finally, once all of the considerations put forward in this video have been met, you're pretty much, more or less, kind of, almost ready to play a tabletop game. And I hope you have fun. The closing bit. Well guys, these are the very basics of playing a tabletop role-playing game. I've really only hit the surface on most of these topics, and there's some topics I haven't touched on at all because they're a little more advanced. But I hope this gets you started, and I hope you come back to learn more about this exciting style of gaming. Please do feel free to leave a comment on how I can improve these videos or what you would like to know more about. The algorithm demands it. I post videos more or less every Friday when it comes to more creative angles, and Mondays is just game day. I can't promise these will be weekly though, as they take a lot more time, but please do subscribe, follow around, I hope to catch you next time. Peace!